to Aware. We are dedicated to communicating information that inspires your positive growth and change. Are you interested in a peaceful planet? Are you interested in optimal health? Are you living with purpose? Are you enjoying your life? We realize each person can make a difference, and our mission is to empower your awareness. The choices that you make in every moment shape your life, and we encourage you to realize that you have your own answers and to always listen to your own truth. We invite you to stay aware. Hello and welcome to The Aware Show. I am Lisa Garr, and it is my true honor to be here today with you, especially engaged in this conversation, which is such a needed, important, passionate conversation that we're having in the world about what is racial ignorance. What does that mean? And then how do you solve racism if you don't even see how deeply ingrained it is in our culture? And this is what we're currently witnessing in this incredible country, of being able to become aware of what this real pandemic, I think, is. The real pandemic, which is the virus of the mind, which is racism. And this is something that we are going to only go forward from. What we have seen with demonstrations and protests, we are not going to unsee, finally. We are finally at that point. So we have also seen something that's not going to stop, is that the people have the power to make real change. This is not necessarily something that is out of our hands, like maybe the banking system was during the Great Recession, or the climate change conversation, that it goes deep into multinational corporations. This is something truly in the hands of us, the people, with our power of our conversations, so that we can begin a new conversation, educate ourselves, bring awareness in and action in around reversing and really learning about the whole conversation of equality, truly. And joining me is Ray Blanchard. He is from Spectrum Life Design. He has so many incredible honors to his name, including being Knight Ray Blanchard. And for 30 years, he has been teaching people to become aware of limiting beliefs, of patterns that keep us stuck. And really on the other side of that is freedom, is real, true freedom, once you change those limiting beliefs and patterns. So welcome, Ray. Thank you so much for being here. So much.
Thank you, Lisa. It is just a pleasure and an honor. It's a privilege to be able to have this conversation out loud and with you, who I know has been very involved in this in the last few weeks, and maybe even before that. But This is really just a privilege to get to speak about this.
Well, I think over the last 20 years of doing the Aware Show, my show has always been about awareness. It's the name of my book, Becoming Aware. And it's this, but the point of the title of the book, Becoming Aware, is that I'm never, ever at that place. I am constantly a student of awareness. And I love that I am constantly always learning. And recently the conversation about white supremacy, about being the supreme privileged white conversation that I've been in. And not that I'm, at the extreme of it at all, but that just simply by the color of my skin, I have a different conversation than people who have different colors of skin. And that's one of the things that I have always looked at, that souls. I've always looked at souls and individuals, and I've always looked from a place of love. And at the same time, I am fully and completely aware that I have a different color of skin, and I want to bring that into the conversation. And so let's just dive right in. Let's just dive right in about talking about the difference between what I'm talking about here about racism and being an anti-racist versus saying, I'm not a racist. Let's go into that conversation.
Well, that's a great conversation to start with. But I want to preface this conversation with, you mentioned supreme, the word supreme. I don't think most people who are of Caucasian or whites think of themselves as supreme. I think some do, but I don't think everybody thinks of it that way. And so let's give a little bit of a credit to some of the people who really aren't consciously racist.
Right.
And to some degree, they just are ignorant of the fact that they are privileged. And I think that's where the white privilege comes in that I think most white people probably live lives with an unconsciousness of just going through their life every day because life has been set up for them and they just wake up in the morning and eat, sleep, breathe the way that it's always been and take everything for granted. And I think that kind of ignorance or unconsciousness is where white bias comes into play and racial ignorance comes into play because they don't really think that they're privileged because it's the way it is for them. It's the status quo for them. They're not thinking about what do Black people, brown people go through every day that they don't have to go through. And that's where the ignorance is. And out of that ignorance, then other forms of racism get set up from that ignorance. And I don't think they're blame themselves for it. They're just going through everyday life. But what you and I are doing with this Aware Show and with this awareness conversation is waking up to that and maybe having some empathy for what the brown, Black people do go through just to be where the average white person is every day.
Yes, yes, yes. And that, as I said, I'm incredibly grateful for this conversation. I've been doing a show called The Aware Show for 20 years, and I've never brought that into my awareness. I've always just looked at the soul. And for me, I look at the message because I know that, and we're going to get to this because you do have an incredibly powerful message that you've taught for 30 years about how to overcome these massive beliefs. But we're going to, that totally shatter your lives. And we live from the lens of these beliefs being our world. So that's to bring it into a conversation about color. I've never really brought it into that context. I've always thought about it as what limiting beliefs can we get over in order to get ourselves to a place of total freedom in a financial context, in a relationship context, in a life context, goals. But this is underlying all of that. And
Well, I was having a conversation recently with a couple of my colleagues about the same thing. And one of them happens to be Black and one of them happens to be white. And the white guy was talking about policy and talking about things that we need to do and philosophizing about what we need to do. And we stopped him right in the midst of that. And we said, now, see, that's exactly where whiteness is right there. You're talking about something that's way beyond the everyday conversation of the average Black person. You're talking about a theory when we're dealing with life on the ground. And you really just haven't even thought about that. And what an example came out of that was that what we do every day, this friend of mine, the Black friend of mine and I was saying that what we do every day is when we go to a meeting and I'm getting ready to get into my car, if there happens to be a policeman nearby, I won't even go out of my door. I will go and look out the window until that cop car is gone because I know that walking out my door is danger. And I don't think the everyday white person thinks about that. It's like when I buckle my seatbelt in my car is one of the first things you do when you start driving. One of the first things we do is look around and see if it's safe and look around. And that's like buckling our seatbelt. Driving down the street, we're looking a block or 2 blocks down the street to see if there's a cop car nearby in a driveway or something. We're looking out for all of that on an ongoing basis. Whereas my white friend was saying, he says, well, I never thought about that. I don't think about that stuff. I just get in my car and go wherever I'm going. Well, we have the added concern of, I'm going to go where I'm going, but I better watch out to see if I'm going to get stopped or something. And my girlfriend, the black friend, is saying, yeah, and if a policeman is behind me, even a block away,
Ooh.
I pull into a gas station or a supermarket or something, pretend that I'm going somewhere so that they can just go by.
Mm, mm, mm. Yes, rather than looking at any types of protecting and serving. Not
Yeah.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah, so we got to have the theoretical conversation of, because I come from oneness, vision, spirit, we're all
Right.
one.
Right.
I teach that, I know that, I love that, that's reality for me. And the average Black, brown person isn't even ready for that conversation because of the concerns that they're going through.
Yeah.
So in a way, when I'm having that conversation with them, they think, well, you're just being white.
Wow. Wow.
You're just being in some kind of philosophy, being that white talk to me.
Huh. Wow.
They don't even yet have access to that.
Dream big, go outside, reach that for the goal. It's right.
It's like, in order to go to have the dream, you gotta handle the stuff on the ground. Mm-hmm. So you gotta have your head in the clouds, but your feet on the ground, and they're dealing with feet on the ground.
You read an incredible letter that really gave the context around this, some of the history around this conversation, that the call that we were on together, and it was a letter from a slave owner, and it was absolutely incredible that this letter was even written, and yet it even still, the intention was for it to apply to 1,000 years from then. When was this letter written?
Around 1712.
Wow.
It's called the Willie Lynch letter, the making of a slave. You want me to read some of it?
Yeah, this is from a slave owner, right?
Right. Willie Lynch was he was a slave owner from the British Isles, from West Indies, and he came over to the U.S., the colonies, to teach white plantation owners how to make a slave and enslave a group for centuries.
Wow.
And the technology for doing that.
This is where the culture started, essentially.
Yes. This letter by Willie Lynch was delivered on the James River in Virginia in 1712. And Lynch was a British slave owner, and he was from the West Indies. And he was invited, as I said, to the colony of Virginia to teach his methods to other slave owners, how to make a slave and keep them enslaved. And it goes like this. Greetings, gentlemen. I greet you here on the bank of the James River in the year of our Lord, 1712. First, I shall thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I'm here to help you solve some of your problems with slaves. Your invitation reached me by my modest plantation in the West Indies, where I've experimented with some of the newest and still the oldest methods of controlling slaves. Ancient Rome would be envious if my program was implemented. As our boat sailed south on the James River, named for our illustrious king, whose version of the Bible we cherish, I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique. while Rome used cords of wood for crosses and standing human bodies along its highways, in dead slaves hanging from trees in great numbers. Here I was I was caught a whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple of miles back. Um, you're not only losing valuable stock by hangings, you're having uprisings. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the fields too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasional fires and animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know that your problems are, you know what they are. I do not need to elaborate. I'm not here to enumerate your problems. I'm here to introduce you to a method of controlling your slaves.
I don't know how much more I can hear of this. Is there, this is really hard to hear.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
It's such a fine line, Ray. I mean, I don't want to even give that letter airtime. I know I asked you to read it, but I can't. I can't.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I can't. I don't think I can keep going. It's just the imagination can go with, I mean, how do you feel reading that?
The first time I read it, I was shocked. I was depressed. Yeah. I felt hopelessness. Yeah. Because as I read further into the letter, it spoke about how to have slaves be stuck in that position for several hundred years. And here we are several hundred years later, going through some of the things he described, and one of the biggest is the separation of fathers from mothers, from their children. Oh. How Black men are often separated from their families, and how that was embedded and continues. And it's one of the biggest issues that we have today in our brown and Black cultures is broken families. Right. And with the George Floyd and the many incidents that have happened recently, their children left without fathers, and they will grow up without fathers. Yes. And it saddens me. I have a nephew and a niece who just got married a year ago, and they're having their first child. And God forbid that something would happen to my nephew, that this child would have to grow up fatherless, because it's happening so often in our culture. So I too have a reaction reading that letter. It's like, it's overwhelming, but what I think it does, it gives us a sense that what's happening today didn't just happen overnight or by accident.
It was intentional. It was intentional, which is why the statues are being torn down, which is why the brands are being eliminated, which is finally about time, which is about time, which is about time. And this is why it's so, the power, this is the power of the people. And this is what I was saying. We don't have to get through the red tape. We don't have to get to the government. We have to wait years, months for public policy to change. It's happening on their streets.
And yes, and the protests are really doing that. That's one thing that's really working, is the voice of the people. And it's the voice of white people, brown people, Black people, all kinds of people. It's a unified voice, and I think that's what's working.
Now, I thought it was important to bring up the letter, although if you want to look it up, you can, but it goes on to really talk about how the culture was shaped for the intention to be for thousands of years to control control Black people. And this is, as you said, it is helpful to show the history, but we've got to be responsible with this history as opposed to how they teach it in fourth grade, which is totally irresponsible. We have to be responsible with how we bring this education forward. I remember my daughter being handed a book by her fourth grade teacher about Harriet Tubman. And I remember having a visceral reaction to that because of the way that it was handled. And this was a decade ago. Mm-hmm. And I remember that feeling of how can she hand her this book to a fourth grader with no context around where we are now? How are we treating our Black and brown friends now? You just hand her this book of Harriet Tubman? Are you kidding? And then she's got to write a report on it without an opinion. No, just to report on the it's just, oh, that made me so mad because it's just reciprocating the violence in our schools, unconsciously, possibly, but it's time to do this in a different way.
Yeah, we gotta set context, and I think that's the thing. And we gotta also bring it into reality, the world we're living in today as well. So we gotta relate history to our current affairs, our current life situation. And I was talking to a friend about this as well. And we were in some kind of theoretical conversations, of course. And I said, until we can understand current affairs in the context of history and gain the wisdom from that, then we can't solve any problems. We're just putting Band-Aids over a wound without getting to the source of it. Right. Because if you really look at the situation, it's contextual. It's a context that we're living in. It's a narrative we're living in. It's a conversation of being that we're living in. And it's not just a conversation like a verbal conversation. It is a conversation of understanding. It's a conversation of being, of our very existence. Like our very existence is a language, is a narrative. It is a language. So we're living in a language, we're living in a conversation. And the conversation has to be understood in order to get up underneath it and alter the narrative. And because as you mentioned earlier about altering your belief systems.
Right.
You can't just institute a new belief until you get underneath the genesis of the belief you got in the first place.
Got it.
And dismantle that.
So let's take this as a moment. I mean, Ray, can we show how it's done to bring about a letter like that, to not give that letter any narrative, to talk about it in an educational way? Can we do that? Can we take this time to do that?
Well, yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that. Let's do that.
Yeah.
So you have this letter by this, what was it, Lynch, David Lynch?
Willie Lynch.
Willie Lynch, okay. How would you teach a fourth grader about the new narrative around a letter like this? I wouldn't read the whole thing.
No, you can't read this whole thing to a fourth grader. This is not the way to do it. The way you do it, I think, is, go to some of the museums and go to some of the historical museums and visit some of the statues in some of the famous cities, like the statue of Roosevelt on the horse. And right beside him on the left was a Black slave. And on the other side standing was an American Indian. And they are like almost naked, and he's sitting on a horse, riding on a horse. And so a fourth grader, above them, fourth grader was asked, why is he riding and why are they standing beside each other? So you could take something like that, an image or something like that, and say, well, let me talk about that in terms of history and how that came about. And I think that's how you teach a fourth grader. You teach them through images and imagery and help them understand art, help them understand you know, things like that, so that they can then begin to put it into a perspective, and you tap their curiosity, you tap their love to learn, their insatiable appetite for absorption,
Hmm.
and for curiosity. And I think that's the way we get to heal the whole thing, even with adults, is that we're not going to legislate racism out of the water. What
Right.
happens is that we tap people's curiosity. They're wanting to understand the conditions. And that's how we started. And but out of that, we can get to the beliefs and how the beliefs started and the genesis of it all.
Yes, yes. And you could say, okay, this is a conversation about equality. What's not equal about the statue? And where do
Yes.
you show inequality happening? And how do you see it happening there? And this is the type of monument, which is actually torn down already. It's already gone. It's on the ground as we speak. Yep.
Yeah. Is it gone? It's
Totally.
gone.
Saw it last night. Came down.
Yeah, I
Yep.
saw the people around it working on it, but and I knew that they were interrupted, but I guess it's gone now.
It was spray painted red, which was very symbolic of the bloodshed that had happened from it, and it was taken down. And so I think that this is, this is, maybe there's another way to do that where you can actually get these into museums and call it the what we can learn about equality museum, and say this is how not to have it. I mean, there's different ways to do that, but I get it. I really get it. And this is the way to bring that awareness up, is through this kind of angst, anarchist type of expressionism right now. I call this expressionism. I
Yeah,
really do. I do.
yeah.
Yeah, we're in
You
an
know,
expressionistic artist phase right now of undoing racism.
yeah, I have a niece in the fifth grade now. She's grown up. She's in the fifth grade now, of course.
Yep,
you
big girl.
you know that phase I'm talking
Yes,
about. The
she's a
kids
big
going
girl.
through. Yeah, she's a big girl now, but she's half black and half white, and she's going through a lot of questions right now, and how people are treating her and how she relates, and her identity. And she's half white, but she's called black because any non-white you have in you, you're black. So she's going through a lot of questions about all of this identity, and she's brilliant. She's brilliant, but she's always curious. She doesn't get angry about it. She just wants to understand.
Mm.
And so you got to have these conversations with people, even adults. So I think that adults are like big kids in a way. They
Well,
just don't realize it, you know?
right, right. So what did you say to her?
Well, I said, well, you've got to just listen. You got to ask your questions, and you got to speak them out loud, and know that it's not a bad thing to have a question about things like that. And if somebody that doesn't understand your question, then come back and we'll talk about it. And we can have other conversations about it. And we can take you on field trips. We can do things so we can start to understand what that's really about. And then you can start to understand some of what other people are going through, kids like you. Because there are other kids like you too. And you have to let them know that you're the kids of the future. You know, you're a blended kid, and you're a kid of the future, and you have the best of all worlds.
Yes.
And I got to empower, her in that way, so that she doesn't
Yes.
feel like she's a leper, or something.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because we were talking about narratives and we're talking about limiting beliefs, and we can reference that conversation because of the narrative that she feels that she's creating for herself right now. I am different, or why are people calling me this when I'm both? And there's a narrative she's creating right now, and it's kind of the narrative that our country created when it created these labels and these brands and these statues and so forth that were monumentalized. And the Aunt Jemima brand and these types of brands now are going away. I think I'm sure KFC is next. What is the kernel? What exactly is that all about? I don't know. You know, we're going to start to dismantle and bring awareness to brands that have represented the narrative of an unequal conversation and bring it on. I think this is only going to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, like I must say that there are a lot of kids now, like the ones I just described, that I talk to every day, like that, who are interracial kids. Uh, and my niece, her mom is so brilliant with her. She's the most brilliant woman in the world. But and she understands. But these brands like Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben's Rice and all of these brands are based in racism. And there are people who have a hard time letting go of those brands. It's like the Confederate flag at Talladega, at the races, the auto races. And people don't want to let that go. But what I think we got to have are these conversations and educational conversations. Like, what does it symbolize? To Black people, the Confederate flag is like the Nazi flags to Jews.
It's danger. It's
absolute danger. Mm-hmm. And to stand for the Nazi flag at the auto race or the NBA basketball game would be unheard of. Mm-hmm. And yet there are people who could stand for the continuation of this Confederate flag. And I can understand how some people are proud of their grandmother or grandfather or great, who were fought in the Confederacy. I can understand maybe they didn't understand the way the world was evolving into the future, and that's all that they knew how to do. And they were proud of the bravery of their parents and grandparents. I can understand some of that. But we gotta now go, but do you understand what that was about in the context of that, what it was about, and what that symbolizes to people these days, and what all these brands are doing? So I really want to acknowledge some of the companies, Quaker and all the other brands, and Geo Wellness, and some of the other people who are taking down some of that racist product line, and also moderating their pricing structures to make some of their health products and things more available in the community. Because what we realize is that racism isn't just about you're this race or that race, it's systematic racism. Yes. One of the reasons why it's an entrapment is that a lot of Black people don't have health care. Do you know that there's only been 10 senators that are Black in the history of this country? 10. That in and of itself is shocking.
Yes, I did not know that. And they're the policymakers, and they're the ones that we're supposed to write to when we want change.
Yeah, so the participation in policy making on the part of Black people are limited. Right. So the understanding of the way of life and the lifestyle and the things that Black people, brown people have gone through is not represented adequately. Mm-hmm. And healthcare. We're in the COVID epidemic, the pandemic rather, period, affecting more Black people, brown people than anyone. Yes. And we're seeing that. And why is it so? It isn't because we have some genetic composition that makes us more susceptible to it. Part of it, obviously, is that we're going to do these essential jobs, these everyday jobs that people can't work from home because they don't have enough money to be able to stay home and work from home. So they get affected by this. But part of it also is because of lack of health care. And rather than go to the doctor or something you can't afford, you shut up and deal with it, and then that leads to further complications. So we got so many things that are in the conversation.
Yes, and so the question is, where do we go from here? The conversation has been started, and as I said, we're not going backwards. We're not going backwards. In this time of social media, we cannot undo or unsee this.
Right.
And
unring the bell, as they say.
Right. And anyone who is slightly in any way off saying the wrong thing, they will be called out so fast. Their education will come in the way of social shaming. And I've seen this happen to, this happened to a girl that I saw on social media, and she did a TikTok to the song she shouldn't have done a TikTok to, and it just destroyed her chances of going to college. She lost her scholarship.
Mm.
She lost, she was just, and she had the opportunity to take it down, and she didn't. That was the problem. So
Mm.
there's ways that you've got to be able to learn to change the narrative. And yes, the narrative came from these types of that letter, and how that permeated, with the intention of that letter to permeate thousands of years. Now we're aware of this in the form of education. I didn't know that letter existed until you brought that up on the call we were on. And I thank you for that. I couldn't go through reading it again. So now we're in a place of awareness. We get this, that there is this narrative, this permeable narrative that's happened over 400 years. Let's start to change the conversation. We've already started to change the conversation. Now, where do we go from here? Brands are coming down. Awareness is coming up. We're starting to make a little teeny bit of a difference with police reform. It's starting. It's starting.
Yeah, there are a lot of things. I think on a personal level, and then on the community level,
Okay.
or personal level, and then on the public level.
Okay.
On a personal level, I think we got to do more of the things that Patrick Hutchinson did in England. When the racist Klan bigot was protesting against the protesters, and he got injured because people attacked him. Well, a couple of Black men rushed in and rescued him from being pummeled by these protesters, put him on his back, put this racist on his back, and took him over to safety to the police.
I saw that
And
photo.
he was asked, why did he do that? It was just the thing to do. And that taps into the humanity that we're headed into, that kind of human being. And we got to elevate who is that kind of human being, because as you said, the transformation has already been launched.
Yes.
And now that it's already launched, now we get to identify some of the qualities of the new human being that we get to elevate and that we get to underscore and model that kind of way of being. And I think if more people was to do that, I think that's the way, is to find examples to model and emulate and feature so that we can educate the masses. And I think we got to start in the schools.
Like I was saying, yes.
I was privileged to do the keynote speech for Broward County. I'll just say Broward County, not too many months ago. They were suffering from the shooting in Parkland shooting. And the teachers, the principals, I spoke mostly with the principals, assistant principals, and the superintendent, about 300 of them. Well, they were still reeling from the Parkland shootings.
Yes.
And their question for me was, how do we stop the MAD?
The what?
The MAD, M-A-D.
Okay.
That's what I call it, stop the MAD. How do we stop more shootings? How do we stop kids from doing that? My point was, you can't stop them by stopping one at a time. You got to stop the conversation. And you got to have kids have a different conversation. And then the question is, so how do you have them have a different conversation?
Yes.
And I said, okay, well, many of these kids are coming to school not ready to learn. They're coming to school from a fight. My parents had a fight. They're coming to school because I didn't get breakfast this morning. They're coming to school because I got bullied on my way here. So they're not ready to learn. And they don't know how to stop their upset and their anger. So we get to teach them how to stop the narrative, how to stop the automatic that they're upset, the automatic anger, the automatic ongoingness, how to stop that, and then look at where it came from. So if we could get them to see how they are involved in a narrative and how they're reacting to a narrative, we can start to teach them how to react differently, but that's only the beginning. And we got to teach them how to stop the reaction. And if we could stop and then look and then choose. Stop, look, and choose. We got to have them do that and teach them how to do that. There's a process we get to teach them. And if we could teach them that, then that's good for them, not only about this racism, it's good for them about being prejudiced against. It's about all the other things that they go through as kids and teenagers. It's a lifelong value. And that's how we create a new human being.
Wouldn't that be great, Ray? Wouldn't that be great, rather than launching into math in your first subject, to actually have a homeroom where you talk about stopping, looking, and choosing in a different way, rather than reaction and ignoring your feelings and disregarding and stuffing down the negative and not speaking about the feeling and just going right into math?
Yeah, because they're not ready to learn it. They're not ready to digest it.
Right.
And then we have kids who fall behind and wonder why they fall behind. It's not intellectual capacity necessarily, it's lack of mental preparedness. So we got to have more mindfulness in schools, and we got to integrate that in the school system and the programs, and let people, young kids, speak out the, like you say, the feeling, and rather than stuffing it, what is that going on? And we got to have those kind of conversations in a very okay environment, and teach them how to look at the reaction and where the reaction came from, so they can manage it, because you can't alter things that you don't see.
Right, right. Which is why I think the conversations that are happening right now in the media, in town halls, in so much of what we're seeing is so healthy. It's so healthy.
Absolutely.
Even, all of it, especially the term Black Lives Matter, that term starts the feeling of the conversation.
Yes, and I can't wait for us to get our movie out called All Dreams Matter. We're doing a film, and we just happened to come up with that title. We were retitling it, and we came up with that title right before all of the protests started. So it was so timely. And it's so amazing. But a lot of the town halls that you say that are happening, I think that's really part of the solution. But ultimately, I think equality is not enough. I think equality is the beginning. The concept of who we are as human beings and the reimagining the new human being as a conscious being is the beginning. But there's economic parity that needs to happen. Social parity. When we talk about basketball teams, football teams, we want, and there might be 32 teams, and we want them to have parity, like equal competitiveness. So we can't let all the talent go on one team and all the lack of talent be on the other team. We got to kind of somehow spread it out for parity. Well, one of the things that's missing in our culture, until that racism can't really be erased, is until there's parity, social parity. That economically, healthcare, so many of the social systems and civic concerns. We gotta focus on it so that there's competitiveness into the marketplace, because it's the playing fields are not level.
No. Yeah, that's part of a huge conversation. Yes.
So I think it's two parts: the psychological, emotional, contextual conversation. And then there's the content conversation. It's like real world, out of the real world phenomenology.
It's the economic part of the conversation. And so that's interesting. So we really can't have an equality conversation until we get to the piece of what's happening economically.
Absolutely.
Is that what, now tell me about the film, All Dreams Matter. I remember you speaking about this, and I'd love to know a little bit more about it. Is that around the context of what we're talking about here?
Yes, it's so well related. We had named the film Reinvented when you heard me talk about it, which was about reinventing who we are as human beings, and to consider a new way of living, that we're all one, a new way of living from a mindfulness and a consciousness place where we get educated to divinity and respectfulness of all beings. Well, when we started shooting the film with some of the famous people that you know, people that you have been engaged with, I won't drop all the names, but you know a lot of the people that are in the film. But when we started shooting the film, we thought, we don't want to just have a lot of talking heads about consciousness and philosophy. Let's see if we can tap some of the teenagers. And we had just been involved in a teen leadership program, teaching teens how to be leaders. So we interviewed some of them on film. And many of them had used the training to transform their lives, but they told horrendous stories, some of them, about being bullied. And some of them told stories about being the bulliers and how they went through shifting to a new kind of being where they wanted to be a leader. Wow. And they tell tear-dropping stories and unbelievable stories. And we took some of that and had them in the film so that they can be our teachers about a new way to consider living and a new way of being a leader, not leader of a gang, not leader of bullying, but leader in a new way of being. So with the stories of these kids and the messages of these famous transformational leaders,
that's how you do it
together.
Yes.
It becomes full-bodied.
That's how you do it. That's what transformational media is. It's media that moves you, not that you watch in a kind of a non-participatory, passive way, but it's media that moves you, that elicits feeling, response, so that you tell someone else, or you change your action, or you share with somebody else to help change their action. That's how that works. Where do we find that film, or is it available, or was
it's
it
not out yet? We will put a trailer out coming up in the next few days, where people can find it on YouTube. It's called All Dreams Matter.
Okay, great.
And people can look at the trailer. Great. And we're putting finishing touches on it. And of course, we always gotta put in a few more bucks and find a few more bucks to finish it off perfectly. You know, many filmmakers are so fastidious about having it be excellent before they will even let their name go on it. So we're going through this final touches, the
Understandable.
endless film.
Now, the transformational process, though, that the teenagers went through, the leadership program, do you teach this, or what was the program? Do you still teach the life design
I still
programs?
teach the life design program in Spectrum. Well, it's no longer Spectrum, it's called Life Design Education now. I still teach that. But one of our colleagues teaches the teen leadership program in Los Angeles.
Nice.
And he actually goes around the nation teaching it, but he's
Ooh,
based in Santa Clarita. And
who is this? Tell me who this is.
Alex Urbina.
Oh, great, great. Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
and he teaches that with us and for us. And he has his own programs, his own show, and things like that. So we partner up to do some of these programs together or consult with each other on designs and work. And he's brilliant. He has this incredible gift of being able to relate to kids of all walks of life, and he's actually done work with gangs in LA and from both sides and in different cities. So he's brilliant, and he teaches the teen leadership program. We also have a teen leadership program being taught out of North Carolina, one of our teachers over there. So they actually collaborate in North Carolina and California to do some work together. So we're getting behind this. And another friend of mine now is developing something called the Confidence Program, which is also about for teens. And we're bringing these into the educational system. So that's our commitment now, is to have emotional intelligence represented in the whole school system, in the school.
That's where it
Program.
needs to start. Absolutely. That's where it needs to start. And so this can be found under lifedesign.com, or could you tell me where?
Alex's program can be found in Teen Leadership. I'm pretty sure you can teenleadership.com. You can find it there. And you can look up Alex Urbina, and you can find him there. And he's brilliant.
Great.
Yeah.
And then life
Or you
design.
can look up another two program, Tamara Barber, Tamrah, Barber, Tamara Barber. You look up her program, and I'll after this show, I'll be glad to give you all the contacts. I just don't have them
Great.
all. Their websites on the top of my head.
No,
This is
that's
just
great.
a
And
conversation.
and you teach this for adults too, life design for adults on dreaming a collective dream, which is important. And so along those lines, and I would just love to know what your vision of a collective dream is, Ray. Can you paint that picture for us? Because we have to see it in our mind's eye in order to create it.
Yes, my dream is for people, a world that works for everyone, where people actually interact with each other. So it's an interpersonally based program where people connect, converse, live together, love together, learn together, and lead together.
Mm.
So together is the bottom line of all of it. Learning to live a life where we see reality, the human reality, as a togetherness rather than a separateness, that we're all involved in this. And learning a language of togetherness, learning a language of unity, learn a way of expressing yourself such that it's not only for you, but that everyone benefits. So I'm looking to continue the work along these lines. And I'm also, other than working with this program through Life Design Education, I'm working with the Heroes Quest, HEROES, the Heroes Quest. What I'm doing there is I'm doing every 2 weeks a free hour and a half session where I take a concept, a transformational concept, and I disseminate it break it down for people, and then we have an interaction for about 45 minutes
Nice.
on what that all meant and how to integrate that in your life to live a heroic life. Because you and I are heroes. The protesters are heroes. The healthcare workers are heroes. The everyday mother, the everyday father who are bringing up these kids
The
are
teacher.
heroes.
Mm-hmm.
The teacher is a hero. We're
Mm-hmm.
all going through our challenges and fighting our dragons and coming out the other side with wisdom. Now it's time to share the wisdoms.
That's beautiful. Is that online, Ray?
That's online. It's called theheroesquest.com,
Oh,
Heroes. So, and that's free for now. I'm going to do a few more free sessions, and then we're going to go into a different model, a
but
training
that's
model.
fantastic, though. That's doing the work of getting the conversation started and bringing people into the dialogue with you, who has 30 years of experience guiding people into their greatness and into the conversation that moves us forward. And that's what your gifts are to the world, and you're able to bring those to us through this show, through this conversation, through education, through all of the initiatives that you have and the film. And I'm just so grateful for you. I've known you for a long time and haven't had this opportunity to go into this deep of a conversation with you. And I've just always seen you as a really, really, really bright light. And so
Thank
I,
you so much, Lisa. And I appreciate all of the times I get to be with you. And you know, you're one of those bright lights too. So every time I see you, it's like this magnet that I'm just magnetized to you.
it's
And
a
with
love
your,
fest. Yes.
yeah, we just have our love fest. And, and
Absolutely.
we always got some new idea. How can we bring more awareness to people? How can we help people be more woke and wake up? And
Yes.
I just applaud your vigor and your stance on that
Mm,
and how you bring that to the world and bring it to the public. So I'm here for you. I'm here for the conversations that you're about
yes.
and the world that you want to open up. And it dovetails right in line with what I'm opening up. And we're in this together.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you so much, Ray. I love you. I appreciate you and all that you do for all of us. And again, you can check out theheroesquest.com and be a part of the dialogue as well with Ray, which is phenomenal. And thank you for being a part of this show. Your energy makes this show possible. And I appreciate you. Until next time, as always, I invite you to stay aware.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.